Amanda, thank you so much for joining us. I want to start with a question from my favorite parenting podcast, One Bad Mother. Who are you and who lives in your house?
Oh, that's a good question. So I'm Amanda. We're talking about professionally who I am. I am a longtime researcher in the kids and tech space, like long time. Like I've been doing it for many, many years, more than 2 decades. But I'm also a
Like
parent.
before it was cool.
Before it was cool. I like to think I made it cool, actually. Um, no. So, who lives in my house? I live with my husband and my youngest child, who is 13 and in eighth grade. But I also have much older kids who range in age from 24 to 30. So this is definitely not my first rodeo. In fact, it's kind of my last rodeo. And it's definitely been a really interesting ride, I will say that. I also have two pandemic Velcro cats living in my house, and they may make an appearance.
Just like, what's a Velcro cat? Like, can they
Oh,
stick to things?
I wish they could stick to things. They just won't leave me alone.
No. I thought I had missed a very important memo, which I was excited to share with my cat loving 8-year-old. I love that. As you said, you have kids that span quite a range in age. What has been important to you in terms of what you're nurturing in your kids? Like, what are you trying to build up in them? What's important to you?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's something, so I parent in a blended family. So I parent with three other adults, and some of my kids are my stepkids, some of my kids are my biological kids. We don't make a distinction in our family about that. But it means that I kind of came into parenting when my first round of kids were just in elementary school or in elementary school, and ended up having a lot of conversations with my husband, both before we got married and when we got married, about like what were we doing here. So I think, we
Mm.
have tried to be quite intentional about what we're trying to nurture in our kids. And I think things that are really important to us are independence and creativity. We want our kids to feel like they are actors in their own lives. I think we emphasize resilience and that you can do hard things, but also that we love you, and that you come from this foundation of real love and support, but also we're not going to make everything hard go away. And I think we that has informed a lot of what we've tried to do and the choices that we've made, both with technology and activities and just sort of life in general. And sometimes it's been great, and sometimes it hasn't been great, to be totally honest. But we've lived through a lot, and I feel incredibly lucky. My kids are awesome. Like I have been, I mean, I don't usually say the word blessed, but I have been literally blessed by having these wonderful people in my life and getting to know them both as kids and adults, and parenting them in the way that I have parented them has just been honestly one of the great joys of my life.
I think a lot of people would share that. I think share that sentiment, myself included, though mine are much earlier. I'm much earlier in the journey. But you said you have one of your eldest is close to 30, mid 20s, close to 30.
30. The oldest is 30, yeah.
So right, so that is almost exactly sort of this arc from internet explosion, social media, and
Yeah.
multiple sort of cycles of different emerging technology. I would love to hear about how devices have gone in your family and sort of any kind of reflection you feel comfortable sharing about if and how that's shifted over time for your approaches with your kids. But
Yeah.
what devices do they have? What age did they get them? And how did you kind of approach that with your own kids?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I will say first of all, we need to level set in that each one of my kids is really different people, right? Like you would be shocked that these
Mm,
people in many cases can have at least one and possibly two of the same biological parent and be so different.
yeah.
Already, I mean, you have kids of your own. They are not the same. Even if you
Yeah. I
think
have
they're going to
twins
be
who
the same.
are like night and day, could not possibly be more different. I mean, I hear you. Amen.
Exactly, right? And so I think that has very much been something that has been a part of what infused what we were doing. But like also let's level set for my oldest, we were barely having phones. Like they got a phone quite late.
Mm.
I think maybe right before they went to college. So, they didn't have a phone until like late in high school because
Yeah.
it wasn't something they needed or wanted. There weren't as many options for phones and they didn't have a smartphone. They
Hmm.
also my oldest kid is very introverted, and so they use social media as a way to kind of manage like sports and like team stuff that they did, but mostly their friendships were focused around phone calling and texting. My middle kid is much more outgoing and went online and spent a lot of time online on groups and like talking for community. Both of my older kids are super into fan fiction and loved fan fiction, like to write it and read it. So I mean, I have definitely like a nerd crew in my house, which I love, right? And then but then by the time we got to the one who's now 24, um, you know, she and maybe one of her middle sibling, they got phones pretty young. They got mobile phones, not smartphones, but stick phones pretty young.
Mm.
Because at the time, like you wouldn't give a kid a smartphone. That thing is really expensive, right?
And when
Like,
was that time? So like
oh
give us
my
a
gosh,
year
let me
for
see.
that. Like year-ish,
Good Lord.
year-ish.
That's gonna be hard. Okay, so
I'm intrigued by this reaction of like you wouldn't give a kid a smartphone, obviously, right? And
it
there
would
is
have
something
been
to that.
2000, 2008, 2009,
Right. So
2010,
the
so
iPhones
so
were in their first couple generations.
they were in their first couple generations.
Yeah.
And, my husband's kind of a Mac fan guy, so he got a phone. It was really exciting. We're like, whoa, you got a phone. That's fancy. So people had stick phones, and they had the phones that in many cases like flipped up and you had a keyboard so you could text. You didn't have to do
Yeah.
T9 text, which if anybody's old enough to remember, you had to like press the button 3 times to get it to do the H or the K.
Yeah.
So they had those kinds of phones. And I will say, interestingly, when my youngest was a toddler, she encountered them and was like, oh my God, this toy. She found like an old one kicking around.
They
Right.
love them. My kids have I have this drawer of like old phones and Blackberries,
Right.
like the Nokia with like the little yellow back screen,
Right. Exactly.
and they've adopted them.
Exactly.
They're their pretend phones. Yeah.
Exactly. So she had that, but she also, because she was younger, she was like going into middle school when other young kids in her middle school were starting to get smartphones. And actually, she and her
Mm-hmm.
two friends, who she became friends with, bonded over the fact they didn't have a smartphone and they had to talk to each other at lunch. And so, because their phones were so boring, they played the game like 16
Yeah.
times on the phone, and I mean, it just can't do anything. But they got
Yeah.
phones quite young because, again, we're a blended family. And, for us, it was important that they be able to reach the other parent, their other biological parent, when they weren't with them. Because sometimes you just want to call your mom or dad. Sometimes you forgot
Yeah.
something. Sometimes one of your parents is really overworked and didn't remember to come get you and you need to call somebody else. So they had phones probably from 8 or 9, but they weren't smartphones. So the phone was kind of
I
boring
see.
and it did things and it texted and it was fine, but it,
Yeah.
it, it entered their lives in a way that was really, it just had a much different impact, right? And I think sometimes
It
we
was a
have forgotten.
communication device.
Yes,
It
it was
was not
about
it was not
communicating.
an internet device necessarily. It was a
No,
communication device.
no, they weren't internet connected. Didn't, sometimes very late they took pictures, but the pictures were bad. They just didn't do that much. Um,
Mm.
but I will say during the youngest of my first wave, again, the one who's now 24, this is when social media is starting to take off. She eventually gets a smartphone, I believe in like ninth or 10th grade. And that child of mine is like a social media ninja. Like she's really good at social media. She kills it on Instagram. Funny and smart and very, very good at it. And so that was definitely a change for us. But I think it's then important to fast forward to my youngest. This is 10 years later. 11 years later. This is a totally different rodeo. It's just
Mm.
different, right? The climate around cell phones, mobile phones, smartphones is different. What social media is and does and the algorithms on it, totally different, right? We have to remember, like, both how we think about these platforms, I think, has really changed over time. And that's something I've spent a lot of time researching, both how families feel about it and how kids feel about it. But I think we also have to look at the national context. Like we have really shifted from a much more positivist frame 10, even 11, 12 years ago to one that is really negative. And so, and I think that's because we know a lot more about what's going on, but also we've kind of decided that smartphones are bad. And, we can talk more about whether
Yeah.
that is something supported by the research or not. But I think there is definitely a new set of choices and worries in front that sits before parents. And I'm happy to talk more about the choices that we did make with my now just brand new, freshly minted 13-year-old in terms of how we approached social media and phones with her.
Yeah. I would
But
love
yeah,
I would love to hear. Let's talk first about the choices that you did make. And then I want to
mhm,
go back to this question of how things have changed over time more broadly. So like we're talking about your kids, I want to finish hearing about your personal journey and
yeah,
your decisions. And then I want to
yeah,
zoom out a little bit and as a researcher who's been eyeballs
yeah,
deep in this since the 90s, like what you see here, and dig
yeah,
into that more. So tell us
sure.
about your youngest and the decisions that you all made.
Yeah. So, we could see very early that my youngest child, she's got a head on her shoulders. She's a smart kid. She generally likes to follow rules. She's pretty well, she had pretty good self-regulation pretty early on, but she loves a good video and really struggles to detach from video content in particular. Like
Mm,
she would watch YouTube all day long if she could. And her dad and I were like, not jazzed by that. So when we made the decision to get her a phone, which we did right around her 12th birthday, so just about a year ago, it was because she was about to go on a plane trip by herself where she would
mm,
be picked up by her grandparents on the other end. And we realized like if something went wrong, there's no such thing as a payphone anymore. Like what is she going to do? She could talk to an adult, but we wanted to give her the independence and the safety of having that device with her. She had had a smartwatch, but it was not really meeting her needs anymore. It was very, very limited. So she had a smartwatch starting when she was 9. And she used it pretty regularly for about a year. And then after that, she kind of stopped using it because it just didn't do enough to be useful for what she wanted to do.
hmm. What did she want to do out of curiosity? And then we'll come back to
I
the
mean, I
phone.
think it was so limited. She struggled to communicate with her closest friends because they either didn't have a smartwatch or they were only texting on a tablet and she could only call a limited number of people. So we like put in her friend's phone number, but many of her friends don't have phones or none of them had phones. So they didn't have a number. You could call their watch, but really that goes to their
Mm,
parents' phone. So like you're really not calling them. You're calling somebody's dad's mobile phone, right? Kids you don't want to do that when you're 11. You would much rather like find a direct route to the person you want to talk to, or you just ask your parents to text the other parent because it's weird to call up somebody's dad and
hmm.
say like, hey, can I talk to my best buddy?
But
So
didn't we
there's
used to do that? Like that's
well, but
what
you
home phones were.
you had a house phone.
Yeah.
And the house phone had the expectation. And I think that's really different. Like a house phone
Mm.
goes to a location where people might be or might not be, but you
Oh,
have a
I see.
chance and the expectation that that phone is not really one person's device.
I
It is
see.
a family's device. So in some ways, yes, you might have to talk briefly to the dad. The dad and the kid, he would be able to say like, "Oh, they're not home right now." Like it's not a device that follows a
Yeah.
person. Like so now
It's a
devices
collective
are
device that is place based as opposed
yes,
to I am calling a parent's personal phone and
exactly.
having them essentially route the information.
Route the information back. And it might be that, in the past, oh, they're upstairs, they're out back, I'll call them to come to the phone, and then you talk to your friend. Now, the chances that you're going to get the dad, have to talk to the dad, and the dad is actually out at the grocery store, picking up the dog from the vet or whatever, right? And that you're not co-located with them, and that the kid is off at soccer with somebody else, right? I think the chances of you getting the person that you want, especially when you know you're calling somebody which is not the person you're trying to call,
Hmm.
and also particularly as you get older in family life, kids are spend less time directly with their parents, right? So calling the dad has a less likelihood of actually reaching your friend.
Yeah, of finding your friend. That's
If you're
interesting.
not a caller and you're not somebody who likes to call, like you want to text, you don't want to like pick up the phone and be like,
Yeah.
hi, Mr. So and so, can I speak to my friend? Right? Like it's if you have other modes of avoidance, you will take them. So
I'm gonna come back to that one because avoidance is a thing I've been thinking about a lot. I'm not convinced it's a good thing that we're
yeah,
not forced to confront things we're uncomfortable with, but I'm gonna I want to come back to that. So, okay. So
Yeah, we can come back to that. So she
your
got a phone,
youngest
but
had this watch. The watch
yep,
stops meeting her needs. She goes on this trip, and then you get a
we get her.
mobile device
Yeah.
for her.
And so we had a whole conversation. We're like, so we were thinking about getting you a flip phone, a stick phone, a feature phone. And she's like, I'd rather not have a phone. Basically, a little bit. And I was shocked, a little bit over my dead body. We were like, whoa, all right. And then we started looking at the cost. I actually think that's a really, really good option for a lot of
Hmm.
families. Um, it it does exactly what you want. It lets you stay connected. It lets you have lightweight ways of connecting to other people, but it doesn't have all the challenges, at least for us, that we were trying to mitigate that you get on a smartphone. So what we did is we did get her a smartphone and we locked that thing down. So
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't, it still has an internet browser, but that internet browser works for 1 minute and then you have to ask for more time. And the internet browser is not visible on the home screen. You have to search for it.
Mm.
So we tried to bury the internet connectivity. You can't eliminate it, but
Yeah.
we buried it as far as we could and essentially said, you know what, you're not going to have the internet in your pocket. You come home, you can sit at a laptop in the house, borrow somebody's laptop, do the searches you need to do, but you are not going to have that in your pocket to sort of bury
Hmm.
into on the school bus, on the subway, on the other things.
Hmm. But I want to push on that for a second
Sure.
because it sounds like, and again, keeping in mind that you have been studying the internet and kids on the
Yeah.
internet for your entire career. Burying the internet was a priority for you. So I want you to
Yeah.
say
And
more about that. Like why was it that the smartphone was fine as hardware and connection to other things, but it was
yeah.
like the internet connectivity that you were really focused on?
Yeah. I mean, for her also, the things that she wanted, the reason why she wanted a smartphone is she wanted to be able to listen to music. And we had
Mm,
really struggled finding ways for her to listen to music personally in her room that, they don't really make MP3 players that are especially functional anymore. And so often the smartphone is the best way to be able to do that. My daughter didn't have her own personal laptop either. She was using Chromebooks from school, and those are super locked down. She also likes to listen to podcasts, and she likes to do Duolingo. She's studying
mm,
Spanish on Duolingo. She likes to read online. Actually, she likes to listen to audiobooks and read. She had a couple other things. She wanted to be able to navigate with maps. So there were a lot of things that were about giving her and boosting her into more independence, we live in a community where she can walk by herself to different places. And we wanted her to be able to do that and to be able to
mm,
feel like she had the tools she needed to do that navigation. But I think one of the things that felt very important to us was that she in particular struggled to regulate like unfettered access to video, particularly
mm,
algorithmically fed video, and that we wanted to just lock that down from her, make the phone a little bit less exciting. So keep it as a really functional
mm,
tool that handled basic important needs that are clearly a priority for early adolescence, but also try to help her grow up a little bit more before she was off diving into algorithmic content. And we also haven't really talked about social media. She doesn't have social media platforms either. It also hasn't been a priority for her because her closest friends also have not had
mm.
access to these things
Yeah, that's a
by
big one.
happenstance.
That's a
And
real
so
big
there
one.
there was no peer pressure. The peer pressure was more like, I am tired of like not being able to reach you and having to talk with your parents about everything. I'm tired of having to go ask my parents to organize my plans. Like, we're old enough to do this. I want to go to the roller skating rink with my two buddies, and we've made a plan on text and now, but I can't really text this one, so
Mm,
somebody's going to have to text her parents. And my husband and I were like, we've been doing this a long time. Like, I don't need to intermediate every, roller skating outing. And so
mm,
thinking about how we could, again, give her more independence to instead of us having to mediate that for her. But yeah,
mm,
I mean, so I do think that
mm,
for us, the algorithmic feed is like a real challenge. And again, I think some of this was like, she doesn't need these platforms. She's not asking for them. We're happy to look at them with her. If she's like, hey, I want to look at TikTok, we're like, sure, let's sit down together and look at it. We used to look at cat
yeah.
videos together and, oh, are you interested in searching for something? Oh, let's look and see what we find. But just doesn't have a lot of unfettered access to social media platforms and certainly not in her pocket. Though we should talk about whether we want to call YouTube a social media platform because that is something Every child in America, like the data is so clear. Pretty much every single child in America uses YouTube, and it's an algorithmic feed, right? It is sending your
Yeah.
kids lots of information and is prioritizing short video, and so it is a gateway to other forms of short video and other social media platforms for your kids.
Absolutely. I'm glad you raised it. I want to hear your take on this. I mean, let's talk about
Yeah,
YouTube for a second.
yeah. I mean, I think YouTube is like I'm sort of surprised sometimes at how much YouTube flies below the radar. Like it does get
Hmm.
lumped in with social media platforms. And we should also step back and pause for a second. Like when we say the word social media, we mean things that are so different, they should not actually be categorized together, right? Well, the way we define social media is that it can be a lot of different things with a lot of things we call affordances, a lot of sort of ways they present themselves and have for a functionality in the world, right? TikTok is like a short algorithmic video feed that is like so optimized to what you like and watch that it basically knows what you like better than you do, right? And it's incredibly attention holding, like more so than pretty much anything else that we have in the market right now. Things like reels, like Instagram has a thing that sort of a lot of other platforms are starting to move into that realm with the short videos, like so Spotify in particular is moving much more into a video space because they see the power of TikTok,
Yeah.
right? And
And just
YouTube,
mimicking the functionality on their own platform. So there's
exactly.
versions of TikTok. If you think about there's the product TikTok, but if you think in terms of functionality and
Right.
and usage, there's a version of that on every single
On many of them. Yes,
platform at
on
this point.
most of the platforms,
Yeah.
right? It's like hyper tuned
Yeah.
to what you do. I mean, I just think right now TikTok's algorithm is still the best. So it remains the most attention holding. But YouTube Shorts, Reels on
Yeah.
Instagram, I mean, these are all of a piece, right? And so, like, that's one aspect, right? This algorithmically generated, sort of hyper focused feed is sort of one aspect of social media. And then there's the more social ones, right? Things like Snap, Discord, even Reddit, though I think like the fact that we might even
Mm.
include Reddit in that is a really different. And then where do we put Twitch, right? Like, so Twitch is a streaming platform. And there's other streaming platforms that
But
sort
it's a
of
hyper
sprang out of the
connected
game.
streaming platform, right? It's not
Exactly.
monodirectional. You're not just like receiving
No,
content, you're also creating content and connecting with
yeah,
people who are creating content
exactly.
live in your
Exactly.
ear.
And the those sort of bi-directional ones, particularly when you can, when you have, celebrities or influencers or creators, young people can also create really strong bonds and sort of what we call parasocial relationships, which is like unidirectional, like emotional connection to people who don't know that you exist, right? Like
Mm,
a lot of times we think about it with
yeah.
celebrities, like your crush on, Taylor Swift is like a parasocial relationship, but young people can have those with influencers and other people
Yeah.
who are sort of micro famous online, and that also can be complicated, right? So I've heard in some of the research I've done a story that a parent told me about a child who was, young middle school tween who was using a lot of streaming platform. I don't remember specifically which one, but had formed a deep attachment to a set of influencers, one in particular,
Mm.
and then spent $800 of her mom's money posting her, like pinning her messages to the top of this creator's feed in the hopes that the creator would see them, right? Like 11, right? Got the mom's
Yeah.
credit card, entered it in, and the mom's like,
Yikes.
what? And they had to have this whole family conversation about like, you can't do this. Like, we really can't, and we're going to take this away. And the child was devastated at the
Mm.
loss of
Hmm.
this relationship to this creator who she
Yeah,
had like
because
learned to love, right?
to the kid, it's like saying you can no longer see your best friend.
Yeah,
They have
totally.
developed this
Exactly.
relationship, and part of what I mean, this is really good timing. I just finished reading the horrifying New York Times piece by Cash Hill,
Yeah,
and
that's really awful.
I've been thinking about chatbots for
Yeah.
about a year now, and there's so many things to worry about. But in terms of thinking about child safety, right? Like so
Yeah.
much of the conversation about child safety is about what you consume and who you're
Yeah.
connecting with, right?
Yeah.
And this other thing that you're pointing to is really big, right? Like the
Yeah.
the ability to like what it feels like to me, and I just wrote a piece in Tech Policy Press
Hmm.
precisely about this. What it's doing is like distorting reality for kids at a time that they are learning how to navigate the world, how to connect with each other, how to create relationships. And
How
part
to
of
be
what's been
human.
bugging me for a while, including about things like even Snapchat, which everyone's like, oh, Snapchat's great. Like, fine. Yeah, they
Mm,
have all
mm.
these security, all these security features, but they also like literally stack rank your best friends and like
Yeah.
tell kids who your best friend is based on what?
Mhm.
Based on like Snapchat's definition
Yeah.
of like what friendship is.
Yep.
That intermediation, I think, has been really grossly overlooked because
Yeah.
probably because it's so intangible. Anyway, I digress here, but you pointed to this kid and like the devastation that they felt.
Yeah.
I've had so many conversations with friends over the last few years that feel similar to that. Like another
Yeah.
version of this utter devastation of the child
Hmm.
because something has been taken from them, and the
Yeah.
parents are like, wait, what, like,
Yeah.
how is this your response?
Yeah.
But when you dig a little, it does make sense.
It does make
And
sense.
how
Yeah.
did we get there?
Yeah. I mean,
And how do we, you
I
know what I
do,
mean, like how do parents think about that in terms of protecting their kids online?
yeah. I mean, I think, look, we can't protect our kids from everything, right? Like, so we need to
Yeah.
remember, and I think back to my own kids and their experiences. Like, everybody experienced devastating experiences in life, right? Not always necessarily tech mediated. Sometimes, like, you didn't make the soccer team and you really, really wanted to, or your two best friends told you that they didn't like you anymore
Yeah.
and dumped you, right? These things, I mean, these are devastating things for adolescents and devastating things for us. If my two best friends were like, sorry, peace out, I would be devastated, right?
Yeah.
So I think we need to remember that, like, this is a human condition that we can't eliminate. And also, like, to go to the sort of mental health side, kids have had poor mental health for a long time. I have parented young people through really serious mental health challenges. I don't need to enumerate them here, but we've been in it, and it wasn't necessarily related to the tech. It was related to a lot of other things happening in their lives and in their brain chemistry and in all sorts of things. So I do want to separate that out, right? That the tech could be enhancing, intermediating,
But
exploding.
it's not the
It's not the sole
source.
source.
Like
It's not
without
the sole
it,
source,
things may go differently, but
right?
it's not the singular source.
It's not the singular source, but I also think that you're right that we are entering an era that I think is about to get really, really complicated around social and emotional relationships with non-human entities, right? We're less uncomfortable with you having a really, really strong relationship with your stuffed animal when you're 6. Because again, we create these effective relationships with things we care about. We kids get attached to objects, but it's a different kettle of fish when that thing responds back to you. And I
And
do
guides
think
you.
and guides you. And
And
I don't want us to step back from the fact that there's really powerful things that can happen on social media that are really positive for kids, right? Like,
yeah.
I have queer children, and my queer children, some of their real difficulties were immensely supported by things that they experienced online, right? Like, they
Mm,
found support and love in it, like, not love, but like support
yeah.
and friendship and acceptance in places online. And that's actually true today for LGBTQ kids as well. It's in the research. I've done a bunch of research on this with some of my colleagues, and it's a powerful thing for
Mm,
kids who are in the minority of some kind in the communities that they're in, right? It helps you to find other people like you, whether that's because you are obsessed with a particular form of anime and you want to find somebody else who loves what you love. AI has the potential to do a bunch of wonderful things in terms of extending and expanding learning. I think helping us to do our work more efficiently and better. But
mm.
that said, right now, it's an unfettered tool that has just been sort of splotted into our communities and our neighborhoods and our kids' lives. And I think sometimes we build things before we think about what's really going to be the impact of them. And I think this is one of those things.
Yeah. And I think one of the other things about AI, and particularly generative AI, that I find
Yeah,
extremely troubling about the
yeah,
narrative and the public discussion
yeah,
is that it's not a baked product. This is
no,
literally like being beta tested globally
yeah,
on
yeah,
everybody. This is a I mean, I don't think it's hyperbole to say like this is a global experiment and we
yeah,
are all a part of it and there's no opt out.
yeah. That's the part that's hard.
So,
You really can't opt
well,
out.
exact right. So, I wanted, you talked about the upside of it. And you know, I think that there is certainly the potential for an upside.
Yeah.
I personally haven't come across much
Yeah.
in the, and I want to distinguish
Yeah.
specifically with generative AI, right?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
With generative AI, like at some point we've got to weigh the trade-offs here, you
Yeah.
guys, right?
Yeah.
Like,
No, totally.
does it make it easier for me to like tone check an email? Yeah, it
Sure.
sure does.
Yeah.
Does it make it easier to, meal plan for the week? Like, yes.
Sure.
Is it
Yeah.
worth the risk of, and not the risk, the very real reality that like kids are using chatbots for homework and then it's coaching them to kill themselves? Like, I'm not sure it's worth that trade-off. So
Yeah.
I'm like
No.
in this place where I feel like, and this brings me to my next question for you about the broader public debate, because generative AI in particular feels like such a dramatically different
Yeah.
beast
Yeah.
than this question of like smartphones and social media, right? And but we're treating them the same way. It sounds like the same debate to me. And I
Yeah.
may be just hearing that in my own little pockets, but I feel like we're treating this thing that is fundamentally different. Like it's not a tool. It is not something that we have any control over. I feel like the broader public has fairly suddenly over the last like year or so really woken up and started talking about it, and it being stuff you and your colleagues have been saying for decades. So how are you, as someone who studied this for multiple decades, feeling about where this debate is right now and how it's unfolding?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And I want to separate out like tech is a really big category. And I think,
Yeah.
how I feel about like word processing is different than how I feel about, the ability to call somebody on a smartphone
Yeah.
versus the ability to, you know, um, the ability to have a Snapchat profile or, stream something on Twitch and Discord versus generative AI. And I agree with you.
Yeah.
Like generative AI is really a phase change. It is qualitatively and quantitatively different from the things that have come before it, the exact parts where even the owners of it don't quite know what's going to come out of it. And also when you train something on the entire slop of the internet, good and bad, you get outputs that are the entire slop, that reflect all aspects of what
Yeah.
it's been trained on. And that is what these have been trained on. And if you continue to make these giant, large language models, these transformer models, which continue to, which you again train without thought, without being thoughtful about what you're putting into the maw of the algorithm, you are going to continue to have this kind of stuff come out. So, when I think about generative AI, and I will say I've had like fun experiences with my family with it. Like we had a whole inside joke around a possum that took up residence in our backyard, and then we made generative AI images of it, and now the possum gives people holiday gifts. I mean, like so like we've found
You can
playful
have fun
ways,
with it. Yeah.
can have fun with it as a family, and it actually is fun because it kind of knits us across these broad age ranges that we have. But that said, like, um, does my 13-year-old daughter have her own ChatGPT account? No, she does not. And we talk about it and we have very clear conversations, which is like, I know your classmates might be using this for school. It's not cool. It's not appropriate. If we find out that you've done it, there will be major consequences. We view that as disrupting your learning, and you're in school to learn these basic skills. And so that's a big challenge I have, which is the ways in which on an academic side,
Mm.
things like generative AI is disrupting learning. I think we have like a panic about it as like a cheating mode. And I do think that is coming up quite a bit. It's
Yeah.
forcing teachers and schools to really change some of their approaches, which is sort of both sad because I think if you have to now take every test on a blue book starting in ninth grade or eighth grade, then you've lost the ability to ask people to do these really deep thought, like long-term term paper type things, which really cannot be done by hand if you believe that everybody's going to cheat on it.
Oh, I see.
Right. So I think like that's a challenge.
I want to follow up though on your daughter. So you said, and remind me, your youngest is 13?
13, yeah.
So you have drawn a line with Chat GPT. Can you say more about why that line exists for you and your husband? And then how did the conversation with your daughter go
Yeah.
about
I
that?
mean, so we've used it again as a family.
Yeah.
So we had a whole situation where we were planning to go on a trip to a place we'd never been before. And we were driving around, going to the grocery store, happened to be all three of us. And, we decided to use ChatGPT. We end up in the car and we're like, ChatGPT, make us a packing list, right? And so ChatGPT makes packing list. It's terrible. It tells us to bring flip-flops to the mountains as an example. And we're like, okay, no. So we are going a place it's cold. It might be raining. And so we work through the whole process of doing that. But it's not something where, as far as I know, my daughter uses it on her own. And I think that is part of the reason why we haven't had a specific conversation about she just can't put it on her phone without us having a conversation about that anyway. And it's not come up. So she hasn't requested it. But if she wanted to use it, she could come to us and be like, hey, I want to use it. But again, it would always be in a context of, oh, okay, what are you going to do with it? A little bit more supervision. Let's do this together. Or even if you're doing it in an unsupervised way, like maybe you're not going to have it in your room by yourself all night long, essentially. We also had a family experience in which we asked it to do something playful, and it gave us really horrifying response around a Halloween costume. And all of us were like shocked. And we had this whole conversation with her about do you understand why your parents are very upset by this? That this basically gave us this, potentially interpretable as a kind of a racist, advice for you about a costume. And we don't want you to do this. And this cannot be trusted. And let's understand. So we had a whole conversation about ooh, these outputs are not trustworthy and you don't necessarily know what you're going to get. And it can be hard for you as somebody who's a learner and just learning something new right now, right? If you're asking it a question about something you don't know anything about, how are you going to know whether to trust the outputs? So we've had those conversations.
Well, that's it, right? Like you just nailed it. That's like when people talk about when to use it and use cases, number one, it's emerging and it's experimental, but what you just said is essentially you have to be able to validate it, to assess and evaluate and adjust what it's saying. And if you don't have the foundation for that, you can't make that assessment.
No,
and
you can't.
There's something about that feels really important in this conversation about kids and AI, especially when it comes to schools too, because it's already been folded into Google products.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's
we don't have a choice.
Right. It's inside a lot of things and you don't even necessarily know it's there, right? Do you use Canva? It's in there. Or you use Photoshop? It's in there, right? So it's actually already working behind the scenes. I do think the sort of LLMs where I interact, and I know that I'm specifically interacting with a large language model or, ChatGPT or a artificial intelligence where I know that that's what I'm doing is qualitatively different than the sort of background work that a lot of these things are doing. So I think it can be even hard for families to know whether they've even ever used it. So I think that's one big problem.
Surprise, you've already been opted into this.
Right. You kind of can't opt out. And also you don't necessarily know if you've used it. And then that makes it really hard for us as researchers to even know how to measure it. Right. So you have to sort of focus on what you can gather, right? Do you want to go through a long list of, have you ever used this platform and this platform and this platform? Did you notice that there was, artificial intelligence working behind the scenes? Oh, no, you didn't. So it gets into this very complicated way of having to have these conversations for families about even what's going on, right? And parents are they're trying to figure this out. They don't always know. A lot of times their kids are spending a little bit more time playing with these platforms, particularly adolescents, because they have more time. They're still in a play mode. They're still playing. Adults don't play as much. Kids, but again, the play, it can get weird, right? So another example from my life is a local teen who I know, who I've known through the community for a long time. She's awesome. She's older than my daughter. And she's really kind of into tech, really into it. And she is also a little bit, she's she can be very pointed. She's super smart and she's going to tell you, she's going to tell you what she thinks. So it's hey, let me get you a cup of coffee at our local coffee shop. And I want to talk to you about, ChatGPT. Do you use it? So we had this whole conversation, but then it turns to the summer and I was like, well, so tell me what are you using it for? She's like, well, okay. So over the summer, I wasn't feeling well. And I basically thought I had a tapeworm. So I asked ChatGPT, I said, do I have a tapeworm? These are my symptoms. And ChatGPT was yes, you have a tapeworm. Right. And she's so I sat with that because I was embarrassed. It was diarrhea. Right. And so I didn't want to talk to my parents about it. And I thought it was kind of weird. And this point, she's 13, 14. And then what happened? She's well, I sat with it for a while, a couple of days. And then I finally told my friend I wasn't feeling well. And my friend was but you don't have a tapeworm. You asked the computer, right? You asked artificial intelligence, go talk to your parents. And so she did. She went to the doctor. She doesn't have a tapeworm. She's fine. But like, this is it. It's like the crux. It's like, it's when there are things that you're embarrassed to talk about with other people, whether it's, I feel really, really bad and really, really sad, or I have diarrhea and I don't know why, right? Those kinds of things. Or like, my best friend said something really mean to me and I want to know, like, how do I address that with her? Those are really hard conversations to have with other people. The fact that like some adolescents don't use these tools as a way to practice this is like boggles my mind, because it's perfectly designed for like that moment of like deep embarrassment and the importance of peers and the sense that you're being watched by everyone. That's like so the hallmarks of early adolescence in particular, that it's like, why wouldn't you?
Yeah,
but we can see
exactly. It's
wrong,
perfectly
right?
made for that. And at the same time, like as I hear you talk through these use cases, I'm like, they're treating it like search.
Yes.
They're treating it like search.
Cases.
It's not search. And this is something that I don't know how many adults understand this about generative AI. It's like ChatGPT is designed to look like a search bar that you recognize. It's literally designed to look like something that feels safe, that you have spent 20 years trusting because the search results are a particular way. And now you're interacting with this thing that is foundationally different on so many levels, and you're thinking about it in your brain like it's a search engine. It is not. It's a predictive engine. And it's fancy autocomplete.
It's just telling you, right?
It's fancy autocomplete. Literally, like how many
likely thing that somebody would have put after, right? Like it is like, what's the next pixel that probably is here? What would somebody else have said? It is not actually based.
It's not search. It's not search. So I've been saying that to a few friends of mine. They're like, wait, like autocomplete? I'm like, yeah. Like imagine you're typing on your phone. How many times is the phone right about what you're trying to say?
Not very often.
Like, I don't know, coin flip for me?
Yeah. I also want to come back to kind of like a broader conversation around tech. Like what's interesting to me is right now we're still in this like honeymoon period, I think, with, you know, the AIs and the generative AI engines. We are not in the honeymoon period with social media and smartphones. And we are in a very different media conversation there, right? Rightly and wrongly, right? As a researcher, the data is not there, right? The data is not there. A lot of parents are having to go on vibes here. And we can see in ways that these don't necessarily serve our kids well, right? But what we do know from the data is that there is a subset of kids for whom things like social media are pretty problematic. It's between 10 and 20%, depending on which study you happen to look at. And those are the kids for whom it's this concept of differential susceptibility. It's a little bit like alcohol, right? Some of us can have 2 drinks and then stop and go home and not drink again for 2 or 3 weeks. Other people, that first drink or that second drink unlocks a thing that they spiral out of control and they really can't manage it. It could be biology, it could be mental health, it could be a lot of different things. We're not going to explore why, but that is a model that I think helps a lot here too. Not every kid gets on a social media platform and instantly feels like everything is terrible, right? That's not how that works. These are also situational or in a moment. I mean, the social media thing is incredibly complicated because you don't know necessarily which platform they're on. You don't necessarily know who else is in the platform with them. You don't know specifically what they're doing in the platform. So like, it's like we're sort of trying to accrete a lot of understanding in an incredibly complex system that we haven't disentangled. So, but what we can say right now is that there are a subset of kids for whom this is a problem. The other roughly 70% is like,
who are those kids? Say more about that for a second. Like
we don't know, and that's
I see. So that 10 to 20% is a like, are there patterns across these kids? ? There are no patterns discernible.
That's what we're trying to understand now. I think there's some suggestion that it's kids who've had adverse childhood experiences, right? That is anything from experiencing trauma of any kind, victim of a crime, divorce in the family, parent death, like all sorts of things. Like that's one potential, which we've seen across the data over the last 10 to 15 years. We've seen it in some European data. We've seen it in US data. I would say based on some recent work I've been doing in which we had a lot of conversations, in some ways by accident, with parents of neurodiverse kids. I think parents of kids with ADHD who are on the autism spectrum in particular, those parents seem to be having a greater level of challenge and struggle with their kids and trying to figure out like, okay, how can I use these tools to support my child in ways that they need more support, but also where are these tools really not serving us well and may not serve us well as a family. And actually
Mm.
those are probably some standard ways that like a parent of a neurotypical child would be able to give a child a device and not have a lot of problems. Those families, I think, are in a special nest of challenge. I don't think we have enough research yet on those families and those populations and those kids to know specifically. We can start to see some patterns, but like figuring out, like, so for instance, we heard a bunch about hyper focusing among kids with ADHD and what happens when they get into an algorithmic feed that is enjoyable to them and that they struggle even more than the rest of us from separating out
Mm.
from these particular feeds. Like, so that's an example.
Mm.
Beyond that, just their data doesn't, there's not like it's girls. Like I think we've heard in the
Yeah,
public
yeah.
conversation that it's girls. I don't think we can say that. I think we have a lot of complexity here. So it means, unfortunately, that right now parents are like, things don't seem to be going well with you. You are playing, you're playing that video game for 5 or 6 hours a day, and I'm uncomfortable with that because your grades are dropping. Or you don't seem to be engaging with other people. You don't have good balance in your life. Like, that's the things that I look for if I'm a parent trying to understand, right? Like, how is this tool or device or
Mm.
platform or game playing in our kids' lives? Because, like, by the way, we haven't talked about games at all. And
I
if you
know.
remember, back in the mists of time, games were the big thing that parents really worried about. And
Yeah.
now, people I've talked to who are like terrified of social media couldn't be bothered to think about the kinds of games their kids are playing. And I was like, you might want to look at that game because that might not be what you think is happening. Like, have you played Fortnite? Have you played Grand Theft Auto? Have you played a first
Roblox.
person shooter with your
Yeah.
kids? Have you played Roblox? Like, have you played these games? Because I think they might not be what you think they are, right?
Yeah.
And you might want to check. So anyway, I think there's like,
Yeah.
the conversation has really shifted.
Mm.
And I think the other thing I also really want to say is I feel like we've elided the conversation about getting a smartphone with getting social media. They're not the same thing. They don't have to be the
Mm.
same thing. You can have
Yeah.
a social media account on the laptop and then you just see it when you're home, right? And you put it in a little bit of a box. You can have a smartphone that doesn't have social media on it. We've decided that they're the same thing, but with a bit of work on the part of a parent, they don't have to be. And so,
Mm.
if you don't want to do that work, the feature phone is also there for you. But if you're up for it, again, and we should have much better resources for parents, which we really don't have right now. And I could
Mm.
talk more about some work I'm doing on that. But you don't have to have it. You don't have to have social media on a phone.
No, I
You
love
can.
that distinction though. That's like a smartphone and social media are not,
They're not synonymous.
they do not need to be attached to each other. Like these are
No,
not the same thing. You
no.
can disentangle them. And you said if for people who are able to do the work, I'd love to hear a little bit more about what that work is to your mind.
It's a lot, right? So it took us
Yeah.
6 hours to set up my kid's phone before we
Oh
gave it
my
to her.
God.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I'm
Oh
mostly
my
my
God. And
husband.
I'm thinking about mine. I'm like, I have three that are in the same age range. Even just like dealing with IT, I'm like, this could be someone's like part-time job. It's just like dealing with
It
IT
could
in the
be.
house. Like,
I
what?
figure I figure that the extreme wealthy people must have people they hire to do this because it is so much work. But so much work. And this is the work I've been doing recently where I've gone out and I've talked to parents in cities in different parts of the country. And everywhere parents are like, I'm exhausted, this is tiring, please don't make should not be my problem
Don't give me
anymore,
another
this is
thing to do.
too hard. Don't give me
Yeah.
another thing to do. Like,
Yeah.
who has time for this?
Amen.
No one. 6 hours,
Has time
what?
for
Are you
this.
kidding me? So i think I think we've got to create tools that help parents in that unboxing moment, in that moment when you
Mm.
decide. How do you decide if your kid is ready for this? Like, that's a whole nother conversation to have. Like, I think there's things you can look for, but like, that's a big decision point in a lot of families' minds. Like, is this the time to get a smartwatch? Is this the time to get a phone? Like,
Yeah, like what are the
why?
indicators? What are the indicators that your kid could be emotionally ready for a device? I think about in my own, so I have two 8-year-olds and a 6-year-old. One of my 8-year-olds can walk to the store alone, and the other one cannot. And
Yeah.
by cannot, I mean, I do not allow her to.
Yeah.
And this is like, the meme online where they're like, how are these kids so different with each other? One, you could like leave home for,
Right.
2 hours, and the other one would like try to jump out of a window with an umbrella. Like, that is
Right.
my situation.
Yeah.
I think a lot about, so Dana Boyd wrote this really great piece about risk versus harm a while back.
Yeah. Yep.
And I love that piece. It helped me think about essentially like what's the foundational work you need to do, and like what are the muscles the kid needs to be
Yep.
able to effectively navigate a particular system, whether that's like taking the subway from point A to point B in a really large city, or walking to the store by themselves, or any number of things. And now I have lost my train of thought.
No, but it's
But those indicators are a big thing for parents to understand, is like not every kid there's no age where it's like, ta-da, now you are ready for a phone. Just like you're probably not ready to drive. Not everyone's ready to drive when they're 15.
No. And it's really hard because parents crave the kind of guidance that they're getting from people who, frankly, to be honest, aren't really that well grounded in the research or cherry pick their data. They're craving an age. They just want something to point to. They want something to externalize that, to like stop the conversation and the stress and the conflict within their own family. So like that's part of it. But you're absolutely right that not every kid is ready for this at the same time, right? So some of it is things that you think about like I want my child to be more independent. I think they're ready for more independence, but they're also, it turns out, not great at managing their possessions. So maybe we'll start with a smartwatch that is attached to their body, right? So harder for them to lose, but you can lose it. We have a neighbor who lost her smartphone twice, right? I mean, smartwatch twice in the backyard, right? While playing. So, thinking about like, is your kid ready for this? And it might be that your kid isn't. And that is a thing where you are going to have to like muscle into parenting a little bit and be like, yeah, I know your best friend has one, but I think we're going to wait a little bit. And with you have the harder challenge of like, can you do different things for your now 8-year-olds?
Yeah. I think we're about at the limit of that. I'm pushing the limits on that one. But I have to say, like, as I'm hearing you talk about this, like, this has all fallen on parents.
Yeah.
All of it has fallen on parents and teachers who are like, given there's really no opt-in. I mean, some people are deciding affirmatively, but like at the end of the day, yes, I agree with everything we were just saying.
Yeah.
There's a lot of like, just like with anything with your kid, the more sort of observant and attentive you are, the more you can recognize like, what are their needs? What are they doing? What are their patterns? Like, yes. At the same time, like, why is this our problem? Like, why is protecting my kid from a chatbot that is marketed to us as a homework device? Why is it my job to police that, to make sure that it doesn't end up coaching my kid into suicide for any number of reasons? Like, how is that our job? Like, why are these products on the market? Question mark. Full stop.
Yeah,
like,
and
we have experimental heart monitors like being placed in people's bodies? Like, no, we do not. Like, play with it. Don't experiment on our children. Like, why is this our problem? And I'm so tired.
I know. Exactly. You're so tired, and
I'm so tired, and I don't work like a traditional full-time job. Like, there are parents who have way less time than I do to spend thinking about this, and like, I'm exhausted.
They don't have time to spend thinking about it. They might be working 2 jobs. They may not be, English may not be their first language. I think we also have to remember that there's a whole subset of parents who don't have the resources, the time, the knowledge to do this. Their kid speaks English better than they do and is the navigator in the household. So what happens in that house when you have to hand over the setup because you can't set it up unless it's in Spanish, right? There's so much that's challenging about being a parent. And then you overlay all the other additional challenges that parents have. And they're legitimately exhausted, and they want tools, guidance. And I think the hard part is that researchers cannot give them this age. We have to give them other things to look for about maturity and about, time management and about their ability to behave themselves in other digital spaces and other opportunities that you give them. Like, are you a good human being in the games you play with your friends? Are you able to navigate a weird text message exchange? Like, what kind of muscles do your kids already have? And then how can you help them build those over time so
Yeah.
that by the time they have these devices, they're ready for it? And also like knowing that like part of our job as parents is we're scaffolding our kids to a digital adulthood, right? I don't want us to be sending 18-year-olds out into the world who've never been on a social media site, who don't know how to manage
Yeah.
themselves, right? We have to give our kids the skills. And that also means we have to let them make mistakes. And like, I think we also have these expectations that like middle schoolers are going to be like perfect human beings online. They are not. Have you met middle schoolers? Have you spent time in a middle school hallway or a lunchroom? Like, middle schoolers are figuring out how to be social, kind humans. They are not there yet. Sometimes they are terrible, and it's because they don't know. Like and they get the feedback from the friend being like, "Don't be a jerk," right? Like, so you have all these layers of learning that are happening, and that's hard when you're
Yeah.
exhausted and tired, and you live in a world where you're kind of expected to haul all the weight as an American parent. Like, you're carrying all your own water and the water of a bunch of other people. You are not especially supported in this country anymore. I don't think you ever were, but it's really particularly bad now.
No, I appreciate the fact that you said American parent because so my family is in Greece and
Yeah,
we go visit and
yeah,
I have lots of friends there who have kids my kids' age, and my observation is that yeah, there's like a lot of similar stuff happening there, but the degree is different and also the mental state of the parents. Like my friends in the US versus
yeah,
my friends in Greece,
yeah,
night and day in terms
yeah,
of their own mental health and their own
yep,
relationship to their devices. But the point is these contexts that we live in, I think really exacerbates a lot of the challenges because we the parents are not in the best place. That does filter out. And I think it's part of the reasons why I am so frustrated by the fact that it's yet another thing for parents to have to think about and navigate when there's
yep.
already so much.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the incentives in these. So, I've actually done research where I've talked to people inside tech companies about
Yeah.
sort of how they think about designing for kids' well-being, or if they do. And the answer is that like there are great people inside most of these companies, and they have no power, and they can't
Yeah.
make any change because the incentives for these companies are to make enormous sums of money very, very quickly and pay back their investors or their shareholders with giant payouts. And if you can't show that you're increasing your stickiness and you're increasing the number of users and how long they spend on your site, anything that you're doing that drops any of those numbers down is like a non-starter. Even if you're like, by the way, kids are dying, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And so, or it does matter, but it's like a PR problem, not like a moral problem. And so I do think there's something
Mm,
about what it means to be in a company that's in this space and place. I think this is where some other technologies and other things were, 5 or 10 years ago, and now AI and generative AI is there. But
mm,
the race to do the bigger and better product is so intense that I think there are blinders on within these companies. And I think they're just missing some of their moral obligations to children and frankly to adults too. I mean, I think
yeah.
there's so often, right? Like, so we haven't even talked about adults who are also using this for mental health challenges. I mean, for us, our hearts are moved when we hear about a minor or a child,
Yeah.
but there are adults who are experiencing this as well. And I think we cannot accept as a society that people are allowed to build tools like this that engage in this
Totally.
way with vulnerable humans. And so I think we either limit vulnerable humans access to it, or we require companies to stop issuing a product and making money from it until they can guarantee in some ways that it's safe. Like, we
Yeah,
have
I
the
mean,
Consumer
but
Product Safety Board,
part of
right, to help us make sure that baby cradles don't kill infants, right? We have the FDA that helps test medications to make sure that we don't kill people with the drugs that we give them to try to save their lives, right? So we have all of these patterns and tools in place. So much money is at stake. There's so much power. We have to figure out ways where we can, I think, rebalance and have this be something where companies take more accountability. And that's to say, like, there are small companies, other companies that do care and are trying to build things that are beneficial and good, and they work on them and they test them extensively with kids and families and adults and psychologists and psychiatrists and doctors, and they make sure that the products that they're building are not harmful. But they often tend to be much more limited, smaller,
yeah, exactly.
contained.
And
They're
the
not
thing
the
is
big
like
stuff.
There was the new decision out of Illinois, right, to limit access for mental health to mental health products and use of
Yeah.
AI for mental health. But the issue is people's actual use of technology is on other products, right? Like people are not going to go to a mental health specific chatbot necessarily. They're just going to use the one they use.
Yep.
And I think there's a lot about the actual practice of using various tools and for what. But the real big question is, why are these products being held to a different standard than a doctor would? Like if you're giving medical advice, when I read the Cash Hill article, I'm reading it and I'm thinking, if a doctor had done this, they would be locked up. Full stop. They're not allowed to do it. Why is this product held to a different standard than a human being? Why have we decided that that's okay? Have we decided that's okay? And what do
Yeah,
we need
because
to do to make a different decision?
yeah, because it's a general purpose product and we don't perceive it as being a medical device. Like we don't perceive it as
Right.
being something. And I think some of this is, to be clear, they're now finally good enough in maybe the last year that you would want to have these conversations and they wouldn't be ridiculous. They would actually be compelling. I think the other issue is the sycophancy, the how
Yeah, it's
the models have
validating.
been tuned to be super validating because like nobody really wants their model to be like, I think that's not a very good idea, right? So they're never going to design towards something that's going to tell you something you don't want to hear.
Yeah.
But that's actually what a good therapist, what a good doctor, what a good friend can do in these moments. It can tell you like, that's not a good idea, please stop. That said, but I think the more detailed it gets, the better it gets, the more responsibility it has to be a moral actor in somebody's life. And again, like this isn't a use case these guys designed for because they don't think about it. Never occurred to them that people
But
are going
like,
to use this, right?
but that's part of it. That's part of the process, right? Like when you're creating a new product in Silicon Valley, you don't know how people are going to use it. Like no one thought Twitter was going to do what it did, but you put it out into the world, you see what people are doing, you take notes and you adjust. And part of what is astonishing to see as someone who's like been working in this space for a while is that we have decided it is to do that kind of beta testing globally with no boundaries and just kind of like ad hoc figure it out as we go and collateral damage be damned. Like kind of feels like that's where we're at with
Yeah,
generative
yeah.
AI. I mean with
I
all of
mean,
these tools, like let's see how
you know,
people use it.
Meta used that with A/B testing, right, around manipulating user sentiment. I mean, I
Yeah.
think we know that companies are doing. We get leaks and we find out that companies are doing sort of things behind the scenes that they shouldn't be doing. And I think that's also important information. And when honestly you teach people that money is the only thing and that humans are
Mm,
in the way of you making money, they're only a thing to be gotten money from as opposed to a thing to be cared for which you have a fiduciary responsibility in other non-monetary ways. Like then I think that's an obstacle. That's just a PR problem you need to mitigate. That's a tune on the model you need to fix. And the idea you'll just iterate through your problems rather than trying to proactively figure out where they are and head
yeah.
them off the path, right? Like, I mean, I want to be sensitive, like in the process, as you know, of innovating technologies, like there are things that even the best, most diverse team can't anticipate in terms of use cases, right? And I think we
Yeah.
have to be sensitive to that. I don't think any of these technologies is ever going to be perfect. We have human beings, and human beings are like weird and terrible and awful, but also we can do our best to put out products that from the get-go probably aren't going to do what some of these things are currently doing.
I fully agree with you. And the question that leads me directly to is, why do children have to be a part of it? Like what you're describing
Yeah.
makes perfect sense to me, right? Like you're rolling out a new product, you got to see how it goes. You have to be able to iterate and have that flexibility. Is it necessary for kids who are 12 to be opted into this by having Google like jam that technology right into Gemini and ta-da, there it is? Like these
Yep.
are choices that
Yeah.
companies are making, investors are making. Like these are choices. It doesn't have to happen this
Yep.
way. And but it is. And just to wrap, part of what I hear you really putting your finger on, and I think is very important to draw out here, is the business model.
Yep.
Because a lot of the conversations are focused on a particular product, They're focused on a product. They're focused on a company. Oh, it's OpenAI. Oh, it's ChatGPT. Oh, it's Meta. It's TikTok. It's the iPhone. No, it's all of it. It's all of it. Like it's a whack-a-mole situation where like you're not solving a problem by addressing TikTok. Like these are all of these companies have different flavors of the same situation that you're describing. What is your purpose as a company, and what is your primary incentive? And when the business model is such that having my user, no matter how old they are, as many users as possible on my platform for as long as possible, you can't untangle that. Like the business model has to change. And that's,
Yep.
I'm not the first to say that, obviously, but
No,
I
and I mean,
appreciate you raising that.
I think the other issue is like identifying who's a child, right? Like in the United States, we
Mm,
have a lot of rules around privacy that that basically push back on any adult needing to identify themselves as such. But it means in order to affirmatively identify somebody as a child or not as a child, you got to know the whole population. You got to identify them. And from a privacy standpoint, we
yeah.
have not been willing as a culture and a society to do that. Putting aside even like the technology that allows you to confirm that somebody is a child or not a child in a digital environment, right? Like how entangled are you going to get in like government identification and biometrics? Like I don't know a lot of parents who are like, yeah, I'm super psyched to give all of my kids like biometric identity information to a company so that it can then like verify that my child is a child, right? And kids want this too. Like I heard from kids being like, I
Mm.
want you to identify who the adults are so you can keep them out of the kids spaces, right? I think there's a real
Oh,
hunger
that's
for this.
interesting.
But if you can't identify who they are and you have rules in place that allow adults to opt out of identifying themselves, then actually figuring out who the kids are so that you can create spaces and so that you can even block them out of spaces is super, super hard in a digital environment. So
Yeah.
unless we
And
come
that's
up with like, it's
a
thing.
whole thing.
I mean, there
That
is a
trade-off is a big
hunger
trade-off.
from parents who are like, you know what I would really like? I'd like for my kid's phone to know that they're 13 and to just set itself up. So I'd like that to know that they're 11 and to set itself up so that all these things are in place without me
Mm.
having to do anything that like creates a much more protective environment out of the box. And I think that, some of that would be about like making sure the phone knows how old you are and that it globalizes settings to do that. And that's going to be frustrating, right? Like to be clear, like the fact that my kid doesn't have internet access on her phone is really annoying some of the time. When I'm like in the car, she's sitting in the passenger seat and I was like, can you look up this thing? She's like, I would. If I had the internet on my phone, mom. And I'm like, oh yeah, you don't. So like there's friction there. It's annoying. But at the same time, I think it's a good trade-off for us right now. But at some point, I'm also going to have to let her use it. And she's going to have to learn so that she can go into the world as a 17-year-old, as an 18-year-old, and like live as a functional digital adult. It's not always that easy,
Yeah.
but we can get there. So
Oh,
I'm
I
confident.
love that. Amanda, this is a great place to close. Before I let you go, can you give us one recommendation or an idea for listeners, whether it's something to read or listen to or like try at home? What do you got
I
for
mean, I
us?
would say that's if you're a parent and you're listening to this and you're like, should I get my kid a phone? Should I get my kid a thing? Know that you don't have to get your child a phone. It doesn't have to do all those things out of the box.
Mm,
Giving your kid a smartphone doesn't mean giving them social media and disentangling, mobility with various types of tools and apps and just using them. So maybe you want to not give your kid a phone, but let them have, a Instagram account at home on the laptop. Right. So I think there's lots of different ways to think about it and customize that experience for you as a parent. And the second thing I would say is you can unwind. You can give somebody
mm,
something and you can open up an account and then you can take it back and say, hey, you know what? This isn't working right now. We're gonna roll this back. We're gonna try again in a year, or we're gonna try again
yeah.
later because it's not working. And that's a really, really hard conversation to have as a parent. So like I think that you're not locked into something. And just because
Yeah.
you gave one kid a phone when they were 11 doesn't mean you have to give another kid a phone when they're 11. It's also an awkward conversation that feels unfair to children. But I think as you're transparent about why you're doing that and what kind of things you want to see in your younger child or your other
Mm,
child as like evidence of readiness, I think you can have those conversations.
I love it. Thank you so much, Amanda.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Emily. So good to talk.
Thank you for your time.